Hi, this is Involved Innovation YouTube channel. In this video, we will see about how to create the Playwright test for a Node.js application. Here, we will use the employee management service, whichever I have created, the link of which I have provided. So in the employment management service, I have used Node.js as the backend and connecting Postgres, doing the CRUD operations. In the employment management system, I have used all the mostly used HTTP methods, which includes get, put, post, and then delete. And then I also Dockerize this entire application, including the Node.js application, the Postgres, and then pgadmin. If you want to follow along, you can use the employment management service, but you can use any service as you wish. With that being said, we will go and take the employment management service. Here you can able to see there is two different tags. One is CRUD Swagger, another one is Dockerize Swagger. The CRUD Swagger is the one which runs locally. The Dockerize Node.js is the one which creates the Docker for the Node.js application and then Postgres and pgadmin. So for this, I will use the Dockerize Node.js. Open the command prompt here and then git clone. Enter the URI -branch Dockerize Node.js. Yep. Now you got this error because this is not linked to any branch. This is okay. So we will open the VS Code here. We will go inside employment management service and then code dot. So this will open this folder in the Visual Studio Code. Now we have opened. Now we will start the Docker environment. To start the Docker environment, I will start a new terminal here in this particular folder. Enter the command docker-compose up -d. This -d detaches this execution from the container so that here we won't see the logs. If you want to see the logs, you can get the container and you can see the running logs, or else you can go back to the Docker for desktop and here you can able to see all the containers. If you click the container, you can able to see the logs. So here we are getting servers listening port 5000, and then we also see the pgadmin and Postgres is also running successfully. Now we will connect to our application. So localhost 5000 and then /API docs. So here our application is successfully started. Now we will also open the pgadmin localhost 5050. That's what our pgadmin is. Here the username and password we have given in the, if you go to the Docker Compose, the username is the admin@email.com and then the password is present in the .env file. So here you need to give admin@email.com and then the password is pass12345. Click login. Here we need to get the Postgres hostname. To get the Postgres hostname, need to track the Docker container. So to list all the Docker containers which is running in your local, use the command docker ps, and then here I am interested in the Postgres. So copy this container ID, docker, and then inspect. Now we got the IP address. This is the IP address. Copy the IP address and then go back to the pgadmin. Here register, click register, go to the server, go to the connections, give the host name as whatever we have copied, and then the username Postgres, and then the password is pass12345. I will name this as Postgres. Save. Now we have connected to the Postgres. This is now connected to the Postgres container. Now go back to this Postgres and then go inside the database, go to schema, and here go to the tables. You can't see any tables, so you need to create the tables. Click the tables and then click query tool. Now go back to the scripts.sql. So copy this and paste it here and then click execute. Now if you refresh this database, you can able to see these tables are getting created. So we have employee table, employee assignment, and team table. Now we are good to start. So we will just go through what are the different endpoints we have. So this post endpoints is to create the employee, and this is to create the team, and then this is create employee and team assignment. So this means it assigns the employee to the team. The retrieval operations include getting the employees, that means gets all the employees, and then get all the teams, and get a particular employee with the employee ID, get a particular team with the team ID, In the update, we are doing employee update and also team update. And then in the delete, we are doing deletion of employee, deletion of team, and then deletion of employee assignment. So here in this case, deletion takes employee ID for employee deletion, team takes team ID for team deletion, and then employee assignment deletion takes the employee ID and team ID. So this is what we have as a CRUD operations. So this interacts with our Postgres database. With that being said, we will now start writing the Playwright. Now go back to the Visual Studio Code. Here enter the command npm init playwright at latest. So this will initialize the Playwright in this particular repo. So here you can choose any flavor as you wish. For this I will just take TypeScript, but you are free to choose anything as you wish. So next one, it asks like where to put the end-to-end test. So here I will just stick with the default tests. So click enter. We can add the GitHub actions, but we will cover that in a different video. For now I will just keep it as true, and then install Playwright browsers. We don't need the browsers, so we can keep it as n because we are doing API testing. If you want to change this later, you can change this later, but here we are most focused on the API testing, so we don't want the Playwright browser. Now we have our base project created. So if you go back to the package.json, we can able to see a dev dependency got created. In the dev dependencies, you can able to see Playwright test, and then a config file created. We will go through this config file in detail, and then we have like GitHub got created. This is for GitHub action. We will go through that in a different video. And we have two folders created. One is test folder and then test examples. For this, we will just delete the text examples. We don't need the test examples. This is just an example. So we will delete this test examples folder. And then now we will go inside this Playwright.config.ts. So here, if you see, we have the test directory specified. This test directory is .tests, and then here the timeout, that is maximum one test can run for. This is in milliseconds. So this is the timeout which we have given. We have given expect timeout, that is a locator need to wait for. For example, if you have a UI application where there is a spinner and then the page load will take some time. So this specifies how much time you need to wait for that particular page to be rendered completely, so that you can catch that particular ID or catch with the XPath. This is fully parallel. That means with the Playwright, you can able to execute the test parallelly. And then forbid only, if you use the test.only, that means you can able to run only one test. If you want to debug, so you don't want to execute everything, you want to just execute only one case, then you can give that as test.only. Here if you have mistakenly gave that and committed the code, then having this will fail the build on CI. And then this is retry, and then there is a workers, and then the reporter is a HTML. This is the out of box solution. You can also use something like Allure, which comes with a very nice bar charts, all those stuff. And then here we will use the use, and we will go in detail with the use. We don't need this project, so for now I'm deleting all these projects, and then I'm also gonna clean up everything below this one. Now we will try to make these changes here to the Playwright.config.ts. So here we will provide our base URL. So the base URL is the URL you need to test. In my case, the base URL is localhost 5000. So I'm just giving it as http://localhost 5000. Next, if your application has like authentication, you need to pass the bearer token or basic auth. You can do that with the help of extra HTTP headers. Here in this case, I don't have the authentication for this localhost extra HTTP headers : and here you can add anything. For example, in my case, if I want to set authorization, I can set this like authorization, and if I have something like basic auth, I can put this as basic or bearer, whatever it is, followed by the code. So in my case, I don't want this authorization, so I am removing it, but it is very simple. You can add the extra headers you want. That can be like content type or anything as you wish, you can put that in the HTTP headers. So this is the config we need on the Playwright. Now we will go back to the test. So this is where all the test scripts lives. So here one key thing to notice, we need to make sure we are naming this like file name.spec.ts. In this case I am using TypeScript, that's why I am coming up with the TypeScript extension, that is TS. If you are using JavaScript, you can just give it as JS. But the key thing to note here is we need to make sure the file is mentioned with spec. So now I will go ahead and delete this. First we will start with a create spec. Here you will create a new employee. So I'm just renaming this file, rename, and I'm giving this, instead of example, I'm just giving it as create test.describe. So here if you are giving it as test.describe, you can put lot of test inside this test.describe, so that if you have familiarized yourself with Gherkin, where you are using Gherkin syntax like given, when, and then, you can achieve a similar kind of steps with using the describe. It takes a string and then it takes a function. This is the string which will be displayed in your report. So give a meaningful name, persist employee detail, and then this takes a function, and inside that I will give test, check the employee, save API, and async, and this takes a function, so async, and here I will take only the request param. Here you can define your step, so await test dot step, and this takes two parameters, one is string and another one is function. So the first is a string which you can define anything as you wish, save the employee details, and this is a async function. Here we can use this request to post or to get, and here I'm gonna call the post operation. I have already created a simple post request. I will copy and paste this one here. So here we are using the request.post. So this triggers the post. Here we don't have any URL mentioned, we just gave the path. If we are doing like this, it automatically takes the base URL whatever you mentioned here. We can override that by overriding the context that we can see later in this video. But if you didn't override the context, that means it will automatically take the base URL whatever you have provided here. And then since this is post, this gets a request body. This data has name, date of joining, email, gender, bio, and designation. This is a JSON I am providing, and this is inside the data. Now this request.post will make a post call to this endpoint by providing this request body. Now we will see how to validate this response. To validate if this response is 200, give expect response dot OK and then dot to be truthy. So if you give to be truthy, that means it will check whether the response is okay. If the response is okay, then that is true. So this evaluates to true. So if you are from a Java background, we will be using assert statement. So this is similar to the assert statement, where this is equivalent to assert true. That means you are asserting this condition that whether this is true or false. Next we will try to validate the data. So to validate the data, you need to parse the response. This is a promise you are getting back, so you need to await on the response.json. You can use response.json method. This returns a promise, so I need to use the await keyword here, and then I can store this in a constant data. If I want to create another step, I need to pass this data to another step, const, and let in the TypeScript uses the block scope. If you want to use this value outside, I will name this as employee underscore list equal to new array. Now we can push this data inside the employee list. To do that, employee list dot push and then data, go inside this and copy this step and paste it here again. Now instead of save the employee details, change this to check if the employee is persisted correctly. And then here you don't need this response, remove this entire thing. We will use the employee list, so I will create a for loop and then let index equal to 0 semicolon index less than employee list dot length colon index plus plus. To check whether this employee is persisted correctly, I want to use the retrieve function request.get, give the string, static string, and also the dynamic value. So to do that, give backtick and then endpoint. Here the endpoint is employee slash dollar and then flower brace. Inside the flower brace, give employee list index dot id. You need to use the await keyword here because this is a promise. You need to capture the response, constant response equal to the request.get, and here we will expect this response to be okay. Copy these 2 lines and paste it here. Now you have the data. Now you need to check whether this data is valid. That means you can validate on any field. The response has an ID. To validate if it has ID, you can use expect data dot id dot to equal. Here we are checking the data.id which we are getting as result of this get method with the value we have saved here. So to get that, employee list and then followed by index dot id. Now we are done with our create spec.ts. We can run or execute this directly, but I want to do it in a clean way. So go to the package.json. Here, just like how you have a command for starting the server, so here I can create one for test and then I can create another one for report. So for test, I want to use the command npx playwright and then test, and then if we want to show this as a report, I will create another script for it. Report colon npx playwright test reporter equal to html and npx playwright show report. Now we are done with our report. Now to execute this, go to our terminal and enter the command npm run report. This will start the test and this will execute the test, and this will create a HTML file and it will automatically open that HTML in the browser. Now you can able to see this HTML. Check the employee save API. So if you go back to the create spec, you have persist employee details. This is persist employee details. Inside that you have check the employee save API, and here you have 2 different steps. One is save the employee details. You can able to see everything is green, and then check if the employee J is persisted correctly. We are seeing everything as green. Now we have tested the post endpoint. Now we can start with the retrieve endpoint. So to start the retrieve endpoint, I will use the same file. So I will copy this entire stuff, and here I will create a new file. Give this as retrieve.spec.ts, and here you can paste this. If you are validating the get endpoint, you need to have some data. If you are persisting that information before, and then if you are testing this, that will result to a flaky test, because like in that particular environment, that particular data might not be there. Let's go through that particular scenario. Instead of persist employee detail, I will change this to retrieve employee detail, retrieve API, and then I will delete this one and give backtick. In the backtick, enter retrieve persisted employee ID, and here I am just keeping this employee ID as 4. This is a random ID. Now here instead of this, I'm just giving it as 5. Now if you try to execute this, so stop this and then rerun the command. So here I also want to see the report, so npm run report. So this will execute both retrieve spec.ts and then create spec.ts. Here you got an error stating the retrieve endpoint failed. There is no such employee who has an employee ID of 5 in this particular environment. Let's take this as a local environment or dev environment. Here you are giving some value to the employee ID and you don't have a database, so that will make this. To make these things work, we need to use after each, after all, before all, and before each. So what that before all does is, if I have like n number of test.describe in this particular file, if I have test.before all, that will be executed only once, and if there is test.after all, that will be executed only once after executing all the test. So if I have like before each or after each, then that will be executed after and before each and every test. Just I will give this as test dot before all, and this takes a function. So here in this case I will give this as async function. This is a request. I will use the arrow function here, and then I will go back to the create spec. I will copy this one, then paste it here, and here instead of employee list I will make this as employee ID. So here instead of employee list, employee ID equal to data dot ID. So here you are persisting this information in the before all using request.post. You are saving the employee details. So here you don't need the step, you can directly give the response. We are persisting this information and you are saving this employee ID, and here instead of using this employee ID, hard-coded employee ID, you can use the employee ID which we have created. $flower brace, here inside that put employee ID, copy this and paste it here, and here instead of 5 just to give employee ID. Just a quick recap. So this before all will be executed before all the test. So now if you have like two different describe, in this case I have one, but if you have even have n number of test.describe, this will be executed only once. And here I am persisting some information in the database using request.post, which we have seen earlier. So this is creation of employee, and I am getting that employee ID because we are very sure this employee is persisted. And if this employee is persisted, then we can validate whether the retrieve endpoint is working fine or not. Now stop this, execute the run report. Now you can able to see the retrieve employee detail ran fine. So if you go inside the before hooks, the before hooks has like before all, and it created an employee, and here the retrieve persisted employee ID for 4, and then we have validated this. We are querying for employee 4. We are checking whether the response is true, and then the employee ID is valid. Update spec, for update spec I will copy this code because we are going to use the before all there also. Create a new file. I will name this as update spec.ts. I will paste this before all I am persisting an employee, and here this is fine because you need an employee before updating. So here instead of get you need to use put. So this put response, you go back to the Swagger to check what are the different things you have. This takes the path param ID in the URI, and also it takes a JSON body. So now go back, instead of retrieve employee details, this is update employee details, and check the employee update API. Before updating, first we can check if the employee information is present. To do that you can use request.get. So here I will change this as request.get, and then in the first step I can put it as check if the employee information is present for the ID, and we are validating whether the employee information is present. Here we are planning to update the bio, so I will also add to update a bio. This JSON has a bio property, so here I will copy and paste this instead of ID, and here I have persisted this as father and software developer. So replace this employee ID with the father and software developer, and then now we can update. So to update I will copy this step and paste it again, and here instead of this one I don't want the get. Instead of this one I will copy and paste the post, and then I will change it to put. So here we want to update, so here I will keep everything as the same, but instead of the same bio I will update this as comma YouTuber. And now I don't need this JSON, we will just validate this updated success, and you can keep this only a step. So here in the first step we are checking if the employee information is present, then we are update the employee information for the ID, update the bio for the employee. I will copy this from retrieve spec.ts, create another step, and check the employee information is updated successfully for the employee ID. Here we have the employee ID, and we need to add the bio here. copy and paste the bio. Here instead of software developer, you can paste this comma YouTuber. So now we have three different steps. We have started with check if the employee information is present for the ID, first step. And then the second one is update the bio for the employee ID. And then the third one is check if the employee information is updated successfully. Before doing all this thing, we have created a before all. This will process the employee information to the Postgres. Stop this and then run the report. Now we can able to see the update really runs fine. And here we have before hook. In the before hook, you have like creation is successful, creation for the employee, and here we are checking if the employee information is present for the ID 7. The employee information is present. Next we are updating the bio for the employee ID 7. That is done successfully. And then we are validating whether the bio updated successfully. Here in this case, the bio is updated successfully. We got green for everything. Now we are done with create, retrieve, and then update. We need to do the delete. So I will create another file. I will name this as delete.spec.ts. Similar to update, we need to persist the employee information and then we need to validate in the test whether the employee information is really present. If the employee information is really present, then we need to delete. After that, we need to validate the employee information is successfully deleted. So in this case, I will use this update spec. This is delete employee detail, and then here check the employee update API. Instead of check the employee update API, this is delete, check the employee delete API. Check the employee information is present for the ID. This is the same exact because we need to first validate whether the employee information is present. You don't need to validate the bio here, so I'm just removing the bio out. And then here instead of put, this should be a delete. So I will remove the data here and put it as delete. And then here we need to get the value for the employee ID and the JSON response. Here if the data is not present, we are giving it as 200, but in your case you need to check whether what is the API responses. In my case, I am giving it as 200, but in the response I am giving info stating like the no employee data found for this ID. First we are validating it is 200. Here in this case we won't get the ID back. Here we will just get the info if it is already deleted, and the info states no employee data found for this ID. Now we are done with our delete. Now stop this and run the report again. Now everything is fine. We'll go inside the delete employee endpoint. Here we are persisting the employee detail and check if the employee is present for the employee ID 8, and then update the bio for the employee ID 8, and then here delete should be like delete the employee ID, delete the employee ID, and then here check the employee information is deleted successfully. We got the data, that is no employee data found for this ID. We have created for all the CRUD operations, and we are also seeing how to test get, put, post, and then delete. Now we will see one of the very important things. You need to make sure you are cleaning up the database whichever you have created as part of running this script. So to do that, we need to create test.afterall. So here in this case, I will just copy this before all. I will paste this at the last just to be clear that this will be executed only once and after executing all the test. So here instead of before all, I will keep it as after all, and here instead of post, this is delete. Here you can use any strategy. For example, if you want to use the SQL directly rather than using the endpoints, you can do as you wish. Request.delete. Here I will just copy and paste this one. This must be already deleted. This is just a cleanup activity. If there is something going bad with this, then we are making sure it is correctly deleted. So here go back to the update. Just copy and paste this after all, and then go back to the retrieve spec. Here also you can paste the same employee ID, and then here in the create spec, the create spec is little different because here we have created a list of employee like this, and here now we will execute this again. We can able to see everything is fine. Just open the create spec. Now we can able to see a after hook. In the after hook you can able to see the dispose being called, and here we have the employee list. Now we will see how to create a new test, and here in this test I want to show you how we can override the context which is created as part of this Playwright config. All the base URLs we are taking from the Playwright.config.ts. So here in this case, if you want to make sure you are overriding that context, you can do that by using Playwright request.newContext, and you can provide the base URL, extra HTTP headers, all those things. So for this I'm gonna show you a geolocation API. This is the API which I am gonna use. It takes two parameters, one is latitude and then longitude. Execute this, we can be able to get the JSON, and this will, based on the latitude and longitude, it will provide us the area or the country which points to this particular latitude and longitude. Now we will create a new test which is geolocation .spec.ts. So this we are particularly creating to show you how we can override the context, and here we don't want to override this context for any other things. So in your application there might be few cases like you need to test in one or two files. You don't want to use the base URL, you want to use some other different URL. So if that is the use case, this might be very helpful for you. Copy this and paste it in the geolocation, and here we want the API context. We will put it as API context because we need to change the API context, and that API context we need to use to get or put our post. So I will name this as API context, and here I will completely delete this. API context equal to await playwright dot request. So here instead of request you can get playwright dot request dot new context, and this new context has a base URL. And go back here, copy and paste this HTTPS, and we have provided our base URL here, and then here retrieve employee detail. Here we can change this to check the geolocation public API, validate geolocation API, and here instead of all this thing I will just put it as validate the latitude and longitude API. Here one key thing to notice, we should not use the request. Here instead of using the request we need to use API context, and remove this request. We no longer read this request, and then here API context dot get and delete this one, and then go back to the browser. We have this here, and then here we have data address dot country. This one is Argentina. Now what we have done is we have overridden our context. We have provided the new base URL, and this is the base URL, and here in the after all we need to dispose the API context. We can do that by using await API context dot dispose. You don't record this request, so I'm just deleting everything. We have after all API context dot dispose. We will rerun this application. Now go back to the geolocation API, and here in the before hooks we can able to see it created a new context, and here we are just providing only the path. Even though we are just providing the path, we can able to see it provided as the correct value, and we got the Argentina back. If you go back and see, the data.country gives us Argentina, and we have overridden our API context. Thanks for watching this video. If you feel this video is really helpful, subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends if you feel this content is helpful. Thank you. Thanks for watching.